Noah, we are back, and we are talking players to buy or sell before it's too late. These can be buy lows, sell highs, anything in between. Either way, we want to move these players before our league mates catch on to these guys. So, Noah, before we get into it, I hope everybody's liking the video, commenting down below some of their buys and sells of the week. And, of course, heading on over to patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind, getting in that Discord server for a free 7-day trial. It's been popping to start the NFL season, and it's only going to get wet and wilder, as Zach would say. But kicking it to you, Noah, getting into your first buy or sell before it's too late. Who do you got? Tell me if you're buying or selling. Tell me why. And what are you looking to pay or get?
Before I say that, something I do want to point out, a tweet that I saw earlier today from Cooper Adams and quoted from Adam Harstad from Adams. For what it's worth, when I did a study on it 2 years ago, I found that redraft ADP is more predictive of rest of season scoring than current season scoring up until after week 4. So we're in primetime season for the season after week 1 for overreactions, for underreactions, for selling players and buying players for way too little or way too much just based off immediate reaction, because we just don't want our fantasy seasons to get tanked immediately. And I totally get that. Before you make any trades, just, think about it, ask a friend about it, get somebody's opinion outside of yourself, which is another great reason for a Discord server like our own. Just somebody else just to help your logic out. That being said, my first player that I want to buy, and that I'll admit I could be slightly irrational about, is J.K. Dobbins. I've been a J.K. Dobbins ever since he got drafted by the Ravens. His rookie season, he had a really good rookie season for a running back. He was poised for a super breakout second season, as with normally happens with running backs. I think he had like 135 carries for 900 something yards maybe, and 9 touchdowns his rookie season. And then, he's just been plagued with injury after injury since then. As a matter of fact, just to remind you, if you've forgotten, it was in 2021. I'm looking at Draft Shark's injury history here. We're looking at a ACL tear grade 3, a knee meniscus trim, and a LCL tear grade 3, and a hamstring tear grade 3. Very bad injury that year. He missed a chunk of that season, missed all of another season, missed all of last season. I can't remember. It's been most of his career, and it's been very sad. But before that, he was doing all right. And I'm here to remind you that players are not injury prone. We can look at their injury history, and if they keep having issues with the exact same thing in the exact same spot, then that's one thing. But when you have a player who's getting injured in different areas of their body, they're just unlucky. I got a stat from one of our many Twitter doctors out there, whose name is Edwin Poras. Excuse me if I said that wrong. I think he works with Fantasy Points right now, that 98% of NFL players get injured within a season. Obviously, severity ranges. No one player is worse off than another, essentially. And also, another thing to keep in mind is he also said players aged 25 or younger have an easier time bouncing back from injuries. So if we had Calvin Ridley or somebody like that was injured at 28 or 29, I would not bank on anything coming from him in the future. Again, back to J.K. Dobbins. He messed up his knee and his quad, and then last year messed up his Achilles. Is it both in the leg? Yes, but it's still two different things. And it means that he's been injury-free of anything related to his knee or his thigh for well over a year, almost 2 years now. The average Achilles recovery time, I think, is like 6 months up to a year. He had his surgery on September 15th last year. He's had almost an entire year since he had that surgery to recover. He's in an offense that, at least coming into the season, we feel like has been super tailored for him. And if we look at his usage rates for week 1, again, we can't super overreact to this stuff and use ADP as a tiebreaker when looking at this. But He led the Chargers in team opportunity share at 24.5%. Now remember, opportunity share is going to be higher for running backs and other positions because they run and they can catch. 24.5% compared to Gus Edwards' 22%. And what that looks like is that Edwards did have 11 rushes to Dobbins' 10, but Dobbins had 9 more snaps, ran 17 routes to Edwards' 5 routes, and obviously did much better than Edwards in fantasy. I think he was like the RB4 for the week. Now, we can't expect the efficiency he had of like 13.5 yards per carry going forward, but I'm very encouraged by his usage in week 1. And if we want to use ADP as a tiebreaker, he was only 17 spots behind Gus Edwards in ADP across all positions, by the way. So it's very close as it is. I like Dobbins. I think his usage points in a good direction. He's not really having to battle anybody else in LA. I'm all in on Dobbins. I think you can still get him for a really good price right now. And as far as that price goes, I looked at Fantasy Calc and I'm seeing trades literally him straight up 1-for-1 for any second round pick from 2027 all the way down to 2025. If I could go and get him for a 2026 second, I would absolutely do that every day of the week. And me personally, I would, if I had to, I think I would probably send the 2025 second. Now, I won't recommend that for everybody else, but that's where I'm at with Dobbins, and I love the prospect of a healthy Dobbins in that offense.
Yeah, I always get concerned when we are coming off somebody who hasn't, you throw the injury prone term out the window, has faced injuries. In his first season, only played 15 games, missed the entirety of 2021 with that ACL that he suffered in the preseason, came back in 2022, only managed to play 8 games, came back in 2023, played 1 game towards Achilles, back this year, running back 4 on the week, like you mentioned, but on the back of some pretty stark efficiency, which is kind of one of the things you expect to see not there from a back who just suffered an Achilles injury. So I'm very cautious. I'm not at the point of sending a second round pick. If you want to talk about a 27 second, that's about where my conversation starts with a second round pick. If I'm sending a second, I'm hoping to get some shred of something back, even a 4th round pick. I'd be happy. I'd be super happy to do something along the lines of maybe I send a 26 second to get a 25 4th and J.K. Dobbins. That's something I'm about. I get to upgrade that pick a year, even though it's 2 rounds later. I get something to use a little bit sooner for the road ahead. But J.K. Dobbins, certainly, like you said, I get it. I am not going to be the one leading the charge on J.K. Dobbins. It's kind of one of those things I'm just happy to kind of maybe I miss out on it. One of the things that is somewhat concerning for me, you look at their usage, just pure rush percentage between the two. J.K. Dobbins a little behind Gus Edwards. They're both in the 40% rush share range, which isn't great. Like I said, he thrived on efficiency, but J.K. Dobbins has been a back that's what he works well with. He works well on efficiency, not a high workload. So I don't know. Like I said, I don't hate it. I like the pick. I'm glad you brought him up because if nothing else, it's somebody that the people are going to be wondering about. And something I think that people are going to be wondering about is what the heck is going on with all of these tight ends this week who just flat out sucked. Tight ends did not do well this week, unless you had Isaiah Likely, unfortunately, on most people's bench. I looked on Sleeper. I think he was like 40-some% rostered and only 20% of people started him. So me included did not start Isaiah Likely, didn't project this huge pop-off week. But regardless, my favorite tight end buy out of the bunch, Trey McBride. And I feel the people panicking about that offense in general. Not a great game from Kyler, whatever the case is. I'm 100% buying in on Trey McBride. Despite only converting 5 receptions for 30 yards, he received 9 targets, which was good for a 29% target share. Anything over 20% is great for a tight end, and 29% was good for the 10th most targeted player by percentage in week 1. Comparing this week to last year, only 55% catch percentage this week 1 compared to 77% over the course of the season in 2023. Only 6 yards per reception compared to 10 yards per reception in 2023. And it also just another feather in his cap. He participated in 100% of routes over 34 pass plays that he was on the field. Anytime he was on the field, he was running a route, high usage. You can't say that for any other tight end that was on the field for more than 15 plays. That is a pretty telling stat right there. Looking at cost too, we're going to talk about him a little bit later. I don't want to get into him too much now, but Isaiah Likely for Trey McBride, that's a move I would most likely make. I get not wanting to pivot off of Likely after we just saw what he did last week. Maybe ride that heat wave for a little bit longer, but I think we'll talk about it later. T. Higgins for Trey McBride. These are all completed trades, by the way. This was in a tight end premium. T. Higgins for Trey McBride, only a 0.5 tight end premium to clarify. Then another one, Rome Odunze for Trey McBride. I think more often than not, this was non-tight end premium. I think more often than not, you move Rome Odunze for Trey McBride plus. However, I will note with the Rome Odunze injury being floated out there and what's going on with that, maybe he is a little devalued where this is a little more spot on. But Trey McBride, super accessible. If you have other tight ends you like that are very good, Dalton Kincaid, another great example, did not have a good week. I'm more than happy to go buy in on him as well. A lot of good things coming into the season obviously did not carry over. I would note with the Bills, their passing offense was just horrid by comparison to what they've done in the past. Attempts were way down for Josh Allen. That's not going to last. Even with this new Joe Brady system coming in, that's not going to stick around. So I'm 100% going after Trey McBride. Better things are ahead for a lot of the tight ends. We talked about it already twice in our videos this week, myself with Zach as well. Here we've talked about it a little bit. Just don't panic. The offenses are going to gel, get their stuff together. It's about weathering the storm and picking up on values where you can and selling high on players where you can as well. To kind of take advantage of your league mates like we're trying to do before they catch on. Noah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one.
I mean, yeah, I'm all for that. I think Isaiah Likely is an incredible talent. Ever since watching him play at Coastal Carolina, I've just really enjoyed watching him play. And, he demonstrated how good he can be in the time that Andrews has missed in the past. And I think we're going to see him. I think he's going to have production this season, but he's not Mark Andrews. And, I could regret this in the future, but I'm totally with you. I think it's definitely a sell high opportunity on Likely, and I would love to convert that opportunity into a tight end that had almost number for number utilization rate in week 1 in Trey McBride. I think that's a great call out. Arizona's offense, they're going to get there. Drew Petzing is a great offensive coordinator, and I'm all in on buying McBride, buying high-end tight ends after this week being so down on tight ends as it is. I mean, when Foster Moreau is your TE2 on the week, you probably have a buy window on some tight ends. So I'm all in for it as far as the cost goes.
Yeah, like I said, it doesn't have to be Trey McBride. If you're not a Trey McBride fan, maybe you have Marvin Harrison Jr., maybe you have James Conner, you don't want to stack up too many Cardinals. Just about any tight end that you can think of that we had high hopes for coming into the season did not do well. So the door is wide open for any of these guys. Just knock on them, see what you can do to get some deals done for some, like you said, put it beautifully, these high-end elite tight ends that are going to be around. There's question marks with Likely going forward. Whether you love Likely, hate Andrews, like Andrews, hate Likely, whatever the case is, there's question marks there. There is no question mark with who Trey McBride is to this offense, and I'm in the business of answering questions for myself before they become questions, and somebody answers them for me. Noah, you're going to talk about another great player here, another great buy. Not to spoil too much, but go ahead and talk about it.
My next player up to buy here is Rashid Shaheed. I had originally wrote about him for a video we didn't get to record a while back, and I do want to just read what I had wrote. This was my thought before his week 1 performance, which was pretty decent. I was catching up on some reception perception profiles last week, and Matt Harmon is a huge fan of Shaheed. The most impressive thing I saw from the stats was a 75% success rate against press coverage, which, when an offense is being run properly, can be a huge boost for the potential of the offense and the amount of creativity that can be used within it. Shaheed is also partnered with Chris Olave, and defenses obviously respect Olave greatly. He's a great wide receiver in this league, even if he has been slightly disappointing for fantasy. This is a perfect duo that, in my opinion, they can open up opportunities for each other with their respective games. And the most exciting part is that this year, we no longer have to watch a Pete Carmichael offense. He wasted so much potential in this offense, but this year we get to have Clint Kubiak, who is a great offensive mind and just spent last season as a passing game coordinator for the 49ers under Kyle Shanahan. And we know the offense can feed two receivers. I mean, you look at Ayuk and Debo. Now, obviously, the Saints aren't going to turn into the 49ers by any means, but he's had some good tutelage, and not just under Shanahan either, before that as well. Derek Carr certainly isn't the best quarterback, but he's more than serviceable for fantasy, and I'm not worried at all about his ability to support both of these guys. Admittedly, he has some issues with injuries this preseason and last year, midseason as well, which probably has some people lower on him for that reason as well. But while the future of the roster in New Orleans is up in the air, it costs next to nothing to buy into a guy that could easily be a locked-in flex player for you all season. And now, of course, we're just now getting this out there, and he's went and had a pretty good week one game. Again, do I think he's going to be putting up week one stats for the rest of the year? No, but he's a more than capable receiver, and he's very inexpensive right now. And I just like the guy. And especially, and I know this is an uncommon setting, if you're in a league with points for return yards, then it's a gold mine, So just keep that in mind as well. I was kind of shocked. I went and looked at some completed trades for him. I'm seeing trades for people getting him straight up for Zeke, DeAndre Hopkins, Alec Pierce, even after this past week, and also straight up for a 2025 third. I would be happy to send any of those guys plus a 2025 third. And speaking on injuries, D-Hop is very old and is now dealing with an injury, and it did not look good this past weekend for the Titans offense, for what that's worth. I would happily send any of those guys plus a 2025 third for Rashid Shaheed. Very excited about him. Would you send one of those offers for Shaheed, Bob?
Yeah, I'm all about it. I'm all about getting in on this. With Alec Pierce, I guess the notion with him is he had a long touchdown this last week too. So I mean, sure, I'm definitely interested. And I think this comes down to, again, something anytime you're acquiring a player or have a player in your lineup, having realistic expectations and having him pegged as a flex play, your wide receiver 3, 4, 5 at the absolute most is a great spot to have him. And you have to think about too, with this offense how it ran, they were blowing out Carolina for most of the game. They were kind of on cruise control after halftime. So I think there's a lot more to be had with this offense. You obviously have the discussion of, well, if it wasn't such a bad defense, would he have had such a good game? And it's like, well, he had over 20% target share, nothing to scoff at. 5 targets, nothing to scoff at. A ton of yards. Obviously, a big part of that is on one play. But either way, yes, I'm in on Shaheed, especially at these costs. Just go get yourself a nice offensive flex piece that at an affordable cost. No sweat, no harm, no foul. I'm very much in on this, Noah.
If it needed to be said, and I hope that it didn't, but I'm actually sure that it does need to be said, there's no reason to panic about Chris Olave either. The simple bit of the matter here is that they didn't need him. They didn't need most of these guys because they were just murdering the Panthers. It could even be a good buy low opportunity for him as well. But yeah, it can be better. We can see a lot of potential here.
This is not a victory lap, but it is a lap of sorts. I'm still excited about this player. I'm talking about Tony Pollard again. I talked about him a good bit this offseason. I don't know when it happened. I became a Tony Pollard guy, but I am still buying in on this mofo. That's what I have on the sheet here, but keeping it PG. Looking at the reason why, looking at week one, Tony Pollard, 61.5% rush share, 12.5% target share. Looking at Tyjae Spears, who was valued as running back 18 at one point on Keep Trade Cut, maybe even higher, 15.38% rush share, 12.5% target share. Hey, he matched him there. Love to see that for him. For some people, for you, Tyjae Spears truthers out there. I don't mean to be mean, but Tony Pollard was very efficient on the ground as well, while being equally involved in the passing game when it came to targets. However, Tyjae Spears did run more routes overall compared to Spears. However, that being said, that means Tony Pollard had a higher concentration of targets per route run, which is important. He's being targeted more when he's running his routes. So overall, week one, I know it's week one. We don't want to take week one as gospel, but Tony Pollard proved to me, as I thought all along, that he is the primary ball carrier in this offense. No shock to me, but this usage should be evidence to any doubters out there. He looked good out there with the ball in his hands. I know we don't want to overreact to week one, but this usage is not close. It'd be a different discussion if it was a 60-40 split, 55-45, whatever the case is. I don't care. The coach said after the game, we want to get him more involved. I regret not getting him more involved. Coach also said it would be a 50-50 split coming into this week. Actions speak louder than words. Like I said, it'd be one thing if the split was close, but it was 60% to 15%. There's a wide gap that is not easily changed or fixed, quote unquote. Looking at Dynasty Daddy, looking at some completed trades, possibilities for going to get Tony Pollard. Jordan Mason, 4 deals moving Jordan Mason for Tony Pollard. We'll talk about him a little bit later, but Jordan Mason certainly showed he can be a top-tier handcuff, but his value is very much capped by the time that Christian McCaffrey returns. We're not going to see much of him once we get a healthy CMC. When does that happen? That is a question mark worth asking. But I understand not wanting to make this deal in general if you have Mason, because he's probably going to score more points. He's in a better offense. So he's going to score more points while CMC is out. But on the flip side of that, the value you get with Tony Pollard, the presumed running back one for that team throughout the rest of the season. And if you don't want to move Jordan Mason, you don't have that level of player or that kind of leverage, whatever the case is. I think a second and third round pick of any kind, any year, is well in play too, or a rookie of similar value. If you're a competitive team, you're trying to compete. Trey Benson is somebody who's probably still valued higher. I would move Trey Benson for Tony Pollard, and you probably get a small plus on top of Tony Pollard as well. So them's are just some thoughts there. We'll touch on Jordan Mason before, but are you interested in Tony Pollard? Do you have anything to add to the discussion between Tony Pollard versus Tyjae Spears, Noah, before we move on?
I would have to say yes and agree with you, but it feels really gross. I've never liked Tony Pollard, and it's not even that I just love Spears or anything, but I don't know. It's just something about him. It's just never really set well with me. But I mean, to your point, incredible utilization rate week one, and that's even after their offense coordinator came out and said that he was projecting a 50-50 split. He said since the game that, they hated how it turned out and that they want to get more touches to Spears. But as you said earlier in the Discord, the proof is in the pudding, and that's what happened. And, the fact that it could have even been an accident of sorts kind of just drives the point home even further. For what you can get him for, I am all in on him at that cost. That's a crazy good price. If I could flip Jordan Mason for him, I would do it in a heartbeat. You even mentioned Trey Benson, which I believe I would absolutely do as well. Anything much more than those costs, I don't think I would do that. I would have a hard time with the second, a third, and another player to upgrade. But yeah, it's a good catch on Pollard, and I'm not going to let you make a full lap of victory yet, but I'll let you be halfway there.
You and Caleb got to keep me grounded, otherwise I'll float through the ceiling of my house. But with that said, speaking of somebody who's not floating through any ceilings anytime soon, we don't think. Talk about your next player here, what you're doing, what you're hoping to get in return, why you're doing what you're doing.
My one and only sell of the video is Stefon Diggs. And I really could not have drawn up this scenario any better for selling a player that is later on in their career. He had a great week this week, scored 2 touchdowns, had a few catches, had 21.9 points, and that's been one of the big questions this entire offseason is what's going to be the pecking order in the Houston wide receiver room. And I think most people are pretty willing to admit that, we shouldn't be crazy worried about any one player over another. Some people probably have been. I've been real stern about Nico Collins being the one, and I think that's true. But me, I've kind of been on the side of Diggs could be the number 2 guy, but I just don't know. But we look at week 1, and we got Diggs with 21.9 points, Nico 17.7, and Tank Dell with 8.9. But if we then go and look at team opportunity share, that gets completely flipped on its head. We have Tank with a 12.5% team opportunity share, Nico with an 11.1, and Diggs with a 9.7. To give you a reference, I think average is probably about 12.5% for wide receivers, or for receivers, wide receiver or tight end in the top like 64. So assuming every team has 2 notable pass catchers. So Diggs, the lowest of the bunch there. He also had the lowest target percentage with 18.8, which is still good, to be very clear. But Tank had 21.9 and Nico had 25. So again, if we're going to tiebreakers here and we're looking at the ADP, Tank Dell's ADP was 36 to Stefon Diggs 37 in underdog this past offseason. And we've seen what Tank Dell can do last year. We've seen what Diggs has done in the past. Diggs is still going to have a good season. Don't get me wrong there. I really do think he's going to have a good season. But I think right now, with a 2-touchdown week in week 1, when neither of the other guys had a touchdown, I think it's a perfect opportunity to capitalize off of that. And, you know, if I could, I would 100% try to get one singular first-round pick for him. Try to find somebody who maybe just lost Puka for a while, or who has Jaden Reed and is really worried about him now that Love is going to be out for a few weeks, and try to sell him Diggs. You know, I definitely think somebody can bite on that. It's a good way to get age off of your roster, get value back for it, and not really be too concerned that it's going to bite you in the end.
Yeah, I'm very much in on moving Diggs as well. And if nothing else, I mean, he went 6 for 6 for 33 yards. And I know both of his touchdowns were rather short, so that does play a role here. But I mean, just we look at the target percentage, which is something I very much live and die on. Sometimes maybe too much to a fault, but it went Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Stefon Diggs in target share. And granted, it's not by much. There's a target separating all of them. Nico had 8, Tank had 7, Stefon Diggs had 6. It's not a world apart, but it is an early pecking order, a week 1 pecking order. You know, there is something to be said for Diggs getting the 2 touchdowns. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think, like you said, this is one of those, you know, when we have an older player on our roster, one of the things you need to be looking for is the exit strategy, whatever the case is, the last chance for gas for the next 100 miles, or, you know, probably be more than that. If you just filled up, you're probably okay. But I hope your car lasts more than 100 miles on a tank of gas. But you get it. You're looking for your exit. And I think this is a great opportunity to sell high. And just, again, I don't think any one of these guys is going to have a terrible season, but they prevent all of them from having a great season as long as they're healthy. And I think that's always been the kicker for me. As much as I, like you, believe Nico's the one, I think Tank Dell is a very high-end number 2. You know, conversations of maybe not to this level, but like an A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith light, where it's something similar to that effect, that type of cohesion, that they can both have very good weeks, very strong target shares, but with a third very strong alpha type target there who's kicking around as a proven vet. Everybody's limiting everyone, and that's the problem. The one thing that's absolutely fact of the matter is Dalton Schultz falling way down the target share pecking order. Don't love to see that if you have him, but been trying to tell you to avoid him all season. But neither here nor there. We're talking about Stefon Diggs. Absolutely get me out for a first-round pick. If you're still trying to compete, guess what? You can move that first-round pick for something else that has some liquidity to it. I hope Stefon Diggs, you weren't intending Stefon Diggs to be your wide receiver 1 or 2. If that's the case, we maybe have some other problems to talk about with your roster. But either way, Noah, great addition, great sell there. And maybe we have some more sells. We're going to get into a buy-sell rapid fire here to round it out. And the first one, we talked about him a little bit already. We talked about the first 2 guys a little bit already. But Jordan Mason, in a nutshell, are you buying? Are you more interested in selling? whatever the case is, are there avenues where both make sense for you? No, what do you think about Jordan Mason?
There's almost always avenues where both make sense,
Mhm.
and especially in Jordan Mason's case. I think more often than not, I will want to be selling Jordan Mason. I mean, he looked incredible on the field last night. I mean, the plays I did get to see, I mean, he looked fast, he looked twitchy. It was great. And it would be the greatest waiver pickup of the year if he wasn't behind one of the greatest running backs in NFL history. I mean, like it's really unfortunate. Now, given I'm sure part of his production has to do with being on the 49ers as well.
Mhm.
But, I think it's a great selling opportunity. And I think the main reason for that is because of how ravenous I have seen people be in the past 24 hours over Jordan Mason and his value. I think, I mean, some of the trades that you were listing off earlier, Jordan Mason for Tony Pollard. Like, I don't even love Tony Pollard, but I would send Jordan Mason for Tony Pollard 100 times out of 100, because we're talking about a running back who's likely an RB1 for a team and a guy who's likely a backup for most of the season. Or given we don't know about McCaffrey, I can't blame anybody for holding him. But if I have him, I'm selling him for the value you can get for him right now.
Yeah, I think I'm most inclined to sell, but I think throwing into a third mix here and playing a little cheaty, I think holding is a great play if you're competitive. Holding him, just chuck him into your lineup. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm sure we could all use a running back upgrade. It sounds like CMC is going to miss at least this next week, maybe future weeks as well. And it could be something that lags on all year where Jordan Mason is taking a game or two or three, maybe more. If you're a competitive team, you could definitely do worse things with your second round pick. In all honesty, if you have CMC, 1,000,000% he's a buy. If you don't have him already, he's 1,000,000% a buy for a second round pick, just to cover yourself, get an elite running back for at least the time being in your starting lineup. But any other case, I'm absolutely selling as a rebuilding team. Just to list off some trades: Jordan Mason for 2 second-round picks, Jordan Mason for a second, Jordan Mason for a second. You see that a ton. So the value is probably right around a second-round pick, flat, wherever you look. There are a couple trades for Jordan Mason for a first-round pick in 25 or 26. He's a hot commodity, and there's nothing wrong with moving him. I certainly wouldn't buy for a first-round pick. I could see buying for a second or a pair of thirds, maybe a third and a somewhat decent player with some interest. But let's move along here. Talk about Isaiah Likely. We talked about him a little bit already. Buy, sell. What are you doing with Isaiah Likely, Noah?
I am 1000% selling Likely. For most of these players, I'm definitely not buying them. But, just once again, like, there are people just absolutely freaking out over these offseason investments that they may have made in Mark Andrews or their startup drafts, or hearing their redraft buddies talk about it. I mean, or being somebody like me who loves playing both types of leagues. I mean, like I said earlier, Likely is a great player, but what you can get in return for him is incredible right now. And, again, things would be a little bit different if he did not have such an incredible player in front of him. I feel like I sound an awful lot like I did last year after Puka Nakua's week 1. And, even with just like, well, hey, Cooper Kupp's there too. What he did it's not reasonable to keep up with. And I fully admit I was completely wrong on that. I may be completely wrong on a couple of our next subjects here as well. At running back and tight end, it's a little bit different. There's not quite as much room on the same field for two of them at the same time, and especially when Mark Andrews is ahead of Likely, and Christian McCaffrey is ahead of Jordan Mason. If I can capitalize off of this, I absolutely am doing it. But just like with Mason, if I don't feel like I'm getting the value that he should have at this exact moment, then I'm happy to sit on him as well. Because who knows with Mark Andrews and the Ravens just as a whole.
Yeah, I'm with you here as well. Probably a sell in most cases. I think if you have him right now and you're not getting great value for him, chucking him into a lineup ain't the worst thing. I think he's going to be viable for a little bit. there is just so much working against Mark Andrews. In that game, he was double teamed or triple teamed more than he ever has been in the last 3 seasons. He was also blocking a lot more than he has in previous years because that offensive line had a major overhaul this offseason as well. And another thing to think about, the fibula injury that, yes, he came back from late last season, but it still sounds like the offseason rehab was absolutely brutal, kind of kept him at bay from getting to 100%. So we need to kind of wait for a lot of players to get up to speed. Mark Andrews might take that much longer coming back from that injury. Last year, we saw Tony Pollard get a little better down the stretch, coming back from a fibula injury himself about halfway through the season. So I think for a while, you're probably going to have, while the O-line's getting figured out, while Mark Andrews is getting up to speed, Isaiah Likely is probably going to be a nice player to have. So I'm probably holding for a while, starting him. But by midseason, I'm probably looking to sell because I think at some point, Mark Andrews, the talent is still there. It'll get figured out. He'll get worked back into the offense. And I think Isaiah Likely kind of becomes the Baltimore wide receiver 2 behind Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, and then Isaiah Likely will be the third option in the offense. And for a tight end, might not be that bad for you. Third receiving option as a tight end, usually a tight end 2 producer. Likely obviously shows that he can make some plays and make some big plays happen. So, I mean, I can't say I want to buy, but I don't love selling for now. I'll probably hold and just kind of see what happens. Sell later, if nothing else. But I think I have a definitive answer now with this next one. Jameson Williams, Noah, your favorite player. You were mad that I put him on the sheet, but too bad he's here. What are you thinking? What are you doing with Jameson Williams?
I'm only mad about it because we absolutely do have to talk about him, and I cannot, in good conscience, recommend buying or selling him. Honestly,
Sure.
I mean, nothing in his career up to this point should suggest that you buy him. And we were having another discussion about him in the Discord the other day. I know the guy has dealt with some injury stuff that was out of his hands, some suspension for gambling that very much so was in his hands. He hasn't, I fully admit, he hasn't had the most fair career, if that's the word you want to use. But, receivers who don't have some sort of production in their first year, and especially the first 2 years combined, more often than not, they don't do anything in their careers, at least nothing sustainable or something that you really want to buy into in a dynasty context. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what keeps them from producing. There's probably something to be said about the experience you gain from those snaps and from those catches and those drops and the times that you actually do get it in the end zone and all of the relationship that you build with teammates and your quarterback on the field. And, that's what's behind those stats that I'm talking about. So I still don't have hope for him going forward. He 100% just objectively, if he does end up panning out, then he is a major outlier in that sense. But outliers are really fun. We love outliers unless it's a guy who's supposed to be really good and then isn't, in which case JMO probably would have been that outlier as well, or has been already. But maybe he can hop to the other side of the fence as well. But I mean, when you look at what he did in week 1, and again, not overreacting to week 1, it was very, very impressive. I mean, if we just look at Detroit's receiving options for week 1, I mean, he had a 16.9% team opportunity share, which, as I said earlier, 12.5 is what I would say is probably about average for a wide receiver. He looked good. He looked fast. He got more snaps than almost anybody else as far as receiving options go. He had even 4 more than Laporta. He ran only 2 less routes than Amon-Ra. He got a rush attempt in there. I mean, he looked good. I mean, high utilization, 32% target rate, 67.9% of the team's air yards. He looked really good. And I can't deny that, but I also can't deny the 2 years of nothing that we've had up to this point. So I really can't say. If I have JMO, he's 1,000% a hold, in my opinion. So I guess I would lean more towards I guess I would like to have him more than I would like to not have him.
That's one way to put it, I suppose. But for me,
Yeah, I guess.
I have similar feelings. I don't have any Jameson Williams, and I can say even with this, I don't feel super inclined to go get him. Like honestly, he had a great week.
Yeah.
I'm not here to take anything away from him, but I'm still wary of what has happened so far. And if you have Jameson Williams and you've been wanting to sell him, here you go. Here's your opportunity.
Yeah.
He just had a great week.
Here's your sell window.
This is your sell window. It's wide open. And we know with how football goes, it can slam shut very quickly. It's certainly not a buy window with something like this. So if you're looking to sell, it's a selling market for him right now. Get him off your roster if that's where you want him to be. But I'm certainly not buying, so I'll leave it at that. But moving on to the next one here, Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin. You added this one to the sheet along with the next duo as well. What are you doing with this backfield? This Denver Broncos running back backfield. Noah, are you buying one, selling the other, selling both, buying both?
So, part of the reason I want to put this on here is to just completely eat crow about a take I put on the channel a month or so ago, where I think I said that I think Jaleel McLaughlin is worth like absolutely nothing. Do I think he's worth a lot now? No, but he's worth more than nothing. Looking at how they utilized him versus Javonte in week 1 was insane in my opinion. And to cover myself a little bit, that take that I had was before, I'm pretty positive it was before Samaje Perine was no longer with the team. So, I'll take that one little blanket for that. But, once they released Perine, especially as close to the season as it was, I mean, clearly they were comfortable with the other options that they had in the room. And, McLaughlin is one of those options. He showed off some ability to be involved in the receiving game last year. And, 24 snaps to Javonte's 36, 15 routes to Javonte's 21. He had 2 more rushes than Javonte, 10 to 8, 5 targets to Javonte's 2. And, 22% team opportunity shares compared to Javonte's 14.9. 11% target share, which if I'm looking at the entire team, I mean, it was Sutton, Reynolds, Devon, Bailey. I never learned how to say that. And then McLaughlin. He's something. I think the only thing that really is probably the biggest part of this is that, do you really want to buy in to what we just saw of Denver's offense this past weekend? I mean, in theory, the Seahawks defense is at least decent, but Nick's was rough to say the least. And, I don't expect a rookie quarterback to come out guns blazing week 1. I mean, I'm certainly not sounding any alarms for Caleb Williams after his week 1, even though he had a stat line only matching Desmond Ridder in history. Which is rough, but I don't think that's going to happen. But I don't really like either. If anything, I am absolutely sounding the panic alarm on Javonte Williams, which makes me really sad. It appears to be that I was so very wrong about him.
Yeah, I'll take a side of crow with you as well. I'm certainly not the McLaughlin truther by any stretch, but at the end of the day, I still don't want anything to do with this backfield. 100% sell. I don't know if I have any Javonte Williams still kicking around. I think I got rid of him at some point in the last season. I know I don't have any McLaughlin, but really, I just don't think I want any of this offense. I think it still has some growing to do and some growing pains to go through. Big old sells for me, despite decent enough usage to maybe suggest some optimism in the future, maybe an elongated role for McLaughlin, but not good for Javonte. Said to be a free agent next offseason, so not good for him. The last duo rounding it out here, Zamir White and Alexander Mattison, another running back that people had high hopes for, and another running back that continues to buck the trend. Whenever you don't want him to produce or you don't expect him to produce, he does, but whenever you want him to produce, he does nothing. Zamir White, Alexander Mattison. Noah, what are you thinking here?
This one was really hard to watch for week one. Antonio Pierce, he came out after the game and said, "We're going to go with the hot hand," which is one of the worst things I could ever hear come out of a head coach's mouth in the NFL. First of all, so that instantly kills much confidence that I could have in an offense. Second, after that, if we go look at the numbers, I mean, it's rough. I mean, Mattison had 36 snaps, just snaps, not even like targets or handoffs or any of that. 36 snaps to Zamir White's 23. Ran 24 routes to Zamir White's 10. Zamir White did have 13 rushes to Mattison's 5. Mattison had 6 targets, which is great for any running back any week, and had a pretty good week. I mean, 16 points on the week for Alexander Mattison. He had a 18.2% target percentage for the team. You know who else had an 18.2% target percentage for the Raiders? Javonte Adams. And the only person that was higher than that for both of them was Brock Bowers with a 24.2%. I'm not really interested in either of these players because as soon as Mattison is the number one guy, he's going to turn into garbage too. But, Zamir White, I think, again, this is one of those guys where you actually can be confident in sounding the panic alarm. Zamir White is not what we hope that he might be coming into the season. And I had a feeling that would be the case, but I think I ended up bending the knee sometime in the offseason, and I'm now paying for it in a couple of my leagues. So
yeah, it's a tough one, man. Sometimes things just don't come to fruition. These are big sells for me as well. Never really believed in the offense. Was always kind of questionable with Zamir White to begin with on how good he could be in an offense. This team is clearly another team kind of in a transition. You have Gardner Minshew at quarterback. You're going to struggle to do some things unless your offensive scheming is very good. And even then, I would not expect that much of the offense. But big sells for me. If you can still sell them for anything, if people are still buying in on hope that this is going to turn around, I don't see it happening personally. But with that said, that's all we got for you guys today. I hope that y'all enjoyed. Please leave a like if you did. Comment down below some of your favorite buys or sells for some of these guys. Some of your favorite buys or sells or least favorite. We want to hear about it. We want to hear from you over in the Discord as well. Patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. That link is in the YouTube description box as well as the pinned comment below. But with all that said, all the promo in the books, Noah and I are going to get the heck on out of here. We will see you in the next one. But until then, I hope that y'all have a good one.